hit the live button and we're live. I've hit the live button and okay. All right. Um, actually, we'll hang out here for a minute, I guess. Connor, you can talk while Mike talks to his chat.
I'm here. I'm
Oh,
here
okay.
whenever you guys are ready.
Cool. So, well, I guess let's just have a little pre-chat here. Uh, so we had the topic of defund the police, and
hmm
Connor, you sent some notes in. Do you guys want to hash out quickly, maybe what you'd like the main points to be that you want to debate on or talk on?
I mean, it doesn't do it doesn't, but like I don't want it to be like an ambush either. So whatever,
Oh, for sure.
whatever.
I mean, I think with any time you have one of these movements, there's a disparate. Everybody has their own idea of what defund the police would mean,
Mm-hmm.
but I think if we talk about it from a critical perspective of the American policing culture, practices, professionalism, effectiveness, um, we could touch on each one of those points. Why reducing funding significantly and reducing the duties associated with the police departments in our country today would be advantageous. And then we could talk a little bit about like why what models around the world should we pursue and why the American model of policing is especially vile and ineffective. I mean, that's the way I would talk about it.
Okay.
And he can counter that by, you know,
Are you
whatever way
fine
he
with
would
us
like.
framing it out like that, Connor?
I'll uh, I'll bring in whatever I got, and then the only I guess the follow up question is: do you have like before we even start? Do you have an ideal model in mind?
Um, I think that there is the answer to that is it's conditional at this point because we're building out, and I don't want to make myself the spokesman of thousands of activists right here and say that I have the plan and I'm the plan. I think that would be pretty damn arrogant of me. But what I could say is I'll show you some examples from around the world where
Mm-hmm.
things are way more effectively done, more professionally done, and that would be some of the things we would build
Sure.
on defunding the police in America and changing the culture around policing in toto. Which is why I am very much sympathetic to the idea of abolishing the police because it's sort of like if you run into a precinct and everybody there is corrupt, the best thing you can do is to just disband the precinct, get rid of all the leadership, and start from scratch. And I think pretty much American policing culture is at that point.
Okay.
It's a
Um,
bold assertion, sir.
It's bold,
all
but it's
right.
also happens
Cool.
to be true.
So we're off to a bold assertion. So I'll go ahead and launch it out because we got some people watching here, and they'll fill in more later. All right, guys. Hey, we're here today to host a debate on defund the police. And I kind of got the idea just because I was talking to Connor last week. If you watched the last stream, and I like his perspective as an ex-cop, and I think that he's got a lot of good ideas for what we can do going forward. And then I wanted to hear from Mike too, as a counter, as someone that might be, I don't know, if Mike, if it's fair, a little bit more radical in the situation, a little bit more for a complete
I'm pretty
overhaul.
sure I'm more radical than the ex-cop. Yes.
Yep. Yeah.
That's
so,
fair.
so that's why I wanted to do this. We're gonna keep doing these. So, guys, I'll open it up to you. I won't interject too much unless I have a question. I'll try not to take sides or whatever. But I'll let you guys introduce yourself. Mike, you want to go first?
I'm Mike from PA. I have a Twitch stream called Central_Committee here on Twitch.tv, and we are a daily news and politics show. My background is in public policy making. I went to law school. I've worked in both policy and in political campaigns. I've also got my own background when it comes to the warrior art, so to speak. And I have a kind of unique perspective on this as somebody who is engaged both in activism but also policy making. So I can bridge the gap between people who use rhetoric with actual hard facts, the numbers, and things like that. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in an empirically based left perspective, that's my show.
Okay, Connor.
Yeah, my name's Connor. I run a small YouTube channel named Counterpoints. Small but growing. It's been pretty fun. I've loved it every little bit of the way. I served in the Marine Corps from 2006 to 2010. I served as a cop from 14 to 18, and you know, I I don't have a lot of like poli sci or the legal education I had was while I was a cop. So there's a lot of like
So not
entrenched
much.
rude, but the entrenched systems that we're talking about, I've seen firsthand inside. Kind of how they work. I have my own gripes with how they work and don't work, probably from a different perspective. So, what I'm hoping to bring to the conversation, hopefully, is the pragmatism, both how it actually works now, and perhaps why some of the suggestions might be ill advised. It's not that I think that law enforcement is perfect. I think it's pretty far from perfect. I just don't know how removing funding helps, and I would be curious as to the proposed models, the proposed models that are supposedly better. One, can we actually implement them, and then two, would they actually be better? So that's kind of what I hope to bring to the conversation.
Okay, awesome. Do you guys want to coin toss on who goes first, or does anybody want to
I
see
would
the
rather
ground?
let Mr. Mike go first, so we can, you know, figure out like a basis for a beginning, and then we can kind of take it from there.
Is that all right with you?
All right,
Mike?
it's fine.
Okay.
So I have the difficult job of sketching out an alternative to the real world, the way we see it today. It's very easy to kind of go, well, it's that way because, there are good reasons for it. Even if I can't articulate it, there must be reasons we do a thing. Now, in policing in America, we have a hyper violent, hyper aggressive, carceral state that doesn't respect constitutional rights or liberties that any free society around the world actually enjoys. And I could give countless examples to that. But one of the things that right before this conversation, I showed my stream the number of police killings in the past 10 years in the United Kingdom, which is an English speaking country with a culture very similar to ours. They had around 50 deaths in the last 10 years. We had 16,900 caused by police. Our population is 5 times larger. So there is something fundamentally different with how policing is done in the United Kingdom and the United States. For example, in London, the murder rate is about 2/3 as much as it is in New York City. Yet they manage to police without the use of firearms and deadly force at anywhere near the rate that we do. And so when somebody says policing is a hard job in America, we have to do that. I watched one of the stories that Connor here had where he almost killed someone, an unarmed man. And in the story, he came to the door not knowing if the suspect was armed with his weapon drawn. And in other societies, like London, like the UK, like in Norway, police do not have ready access to lethal weapons. They only deploy them when they know there is a dangerous threat. Would that be increased risk for the officers? Yes. But the hundreds of thousands of life years lost in the United States to police officers shows to me that our model is way off. And furthermore, when you look at police effectiveness in the United States, they're spending very little of their time in violent crime. A recent study showed only 3% of police officer time is spent in violent crime. And they're dicking around doing traffic stops, harassing people for smoking marijuana. That is the bulk of their time as a police officer. And in other countries like Norway, you could compare their effectiveness to ours. In Norway, they have a 100% clearance rate on murders. The average metro police department in the United States has 60% clearance rate. What is clearance rate? It means basically that they close the case. They either come to an arrest or find the killing to be justified, right? In the United States, most rapists get away. We have huge backlogs of rape kits. So what is all this huge police funding that's billions of dollars being poured into? It is not being poured into the dangerous crimes. They are ineffective at solving them, and they're committing violence against citizens at a much higher rate and a much more lethal rate than other police departments around the world. And if you're an American citizen, you know that every interaction with a police officer could potentially be lethal. And that's not the way a proud citizen should be interacting with the state. And if you think it's okay, you have totally different priorities. And I frankly don't think they are very well rooted in the tradition of civil liberties of America, or frankly, any other country that's developed. So that's where I would start.
Okay. So number one, do you believe in the private right to keep and bear arms?
I think that is a irrelevant question to what we're talking about, because
absolutely not.
Because countries like Switzerland, Canada, Finland all have privately held firearms. They have a lower rate. There is more restrictions, but citizens hold weapons all over the world. And in Finland, for example, they have less weapons than we do, about 40 per 100. We have 120, so we have about 4 times as many weapons per person.
Bro, you got to stop triggering me, okay?
I'm giving you just straight facts. I know you get emotional when the facts come out, but this is
emotional pretty fast.
Let's
okay.
Well, I mean, guys, let's keep it straight. Like,
listen, I didn't even get into the steroid abuse that's endemic in American policing. But if it's emotional, then we will have to.
Let's keep it straight and to one point at a time. Connor, you want to reply?
Jesus Christ!
I don't want to dominate 40% of the time.
That's okay, Mike. Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
You're about to dominate 90% of it if you can't answer a question. Okay, so do American citizens, or in any city, like in any country, okay, should people have the right to keep and bear private arms? It's completely relevant, I promise you. Please answer the question.
I just said that it's irrelevant because they're held by civilians all the time.
Listen, I'm trying to come with like a peaceable. Like I'm trying to de-escalate, okay?
So
I'm trying to de-escalate the situation, and frankly, you're not doing a great job of de-escalating.
I mean, am I the cop here, or are you? Who's got the authority of the state behind me? Who's got the gun?
Well, I'm no longer a cop. I'm just another citizen. But I would like to point out that almost every single thing that you've said so far, basically talking about my personal experience, talking about stats, refusing to answer a direct question. I just said it's irrelevant, but sure, who cares? It's not irrelevant. Answer the fucking question.
I said it's irrelevant. Who cares? But sure.
Okay,
sure,
so,
it's fine.
Okay,
Own guns.
Okay, so do you think the fact that not only are Americans able to own guns, but they're also allowed to keep them on their person, as far as concealed weapons, as far as open carry, as far as all that kind of stuff?
I don't see any right in the Second Amendment to have a concealed weapon. And in fact, the founding fathers were very much against concealed weapons. But you would know that if you read Heller versus DC, which was the case that determined that the Second Amendment does apply to individuals. If you actually read Scalia's decision, he says that concealed weapons are nowhere in the Second Amendment. And because states have decided to do that, that's not inherent to the right to bear arms, does not include the right to bear hidden arms. That would not be reading the Constitution closely. That would be legislating from the bench. So
okay, so you would actually
I don't think concealed weapons, if they were regulated, I wouldn't care.
Okay, so constitutionally, just to follow you on your own logic, so the Constitution doesn't say that private citizens should be able to bear concealable weapons.
No.
However, they should be able to carry military grade weapons around the state.
I think no one believes that.
Okay, well,
maybe some extremists do, but that's babble. No one thinks that you should be able to own a private nuclear weapon or a 2,000-pound bomb. I don't think. Maybe you do think that, but I don't think many people believe that you should have mortars in private hands or belt-fed heavy machine guns. Maybe you do think that. I don't know where exactly on the Second Amendment.
I'm I'm not an ANCAP, but so
So
basically,
you believe that we should regulate guns like me? You just have a different line of where it should be drawn. I believe it should be drawn in the place that's most effective to reduce harm. You believe it should be drawn at whatever arbitrary thing you say it should be.
that sounds like straw manning pretty quick. So I haven't even staked out
Okay.
any kind of position I haven't staked out any position whatsoever. All I've asked basically. Okay, so let me just illustrate a point real quick. That way I don't have to lead you with 10 different questions. Okay.
Sure.
So all right, so let's just do that instead. So my point would be that in the United States of America, with the ready access of firearms, with firearms basically being more common than the human beings that actually live inside the United States, policing in the United States of America is relatively unique, unless you were talking about an undeveloped country, a country at war, or a country that's controlled by narco cartels.
Okay, so
that's because hold up, I'm not done. You talk for like 10 minutes. Let me
okay,
talk
go on. But
Jesus fucking Christ,
go
okay.
on. But you asked me questions.
Connor,
if
you're not going to answer the fucking questions, and let me finish a point.
I already did.
Connor has the floor.
About to give me a fucking heart attack. It's 2 minutes into the fucking debate. So the point being that when you, I borderline need to fucking stand up already. So the point being that policing in the United States is unique because of firearms. We are unique in the developed world in the fact that we have private firearms. The fact that I went in with my gun already fucking drawn is indicative of a unique American scenario, which is that any American citizen can have a firearm on their person at any time. In order to achieve Western European style levels of lethality between civilian and the population, then you would have to have Western European style gun control. I don't want Western European style gun control. And frankly, I don't understand how anybody in the age of Donald Trump can think that Western style European gun control is a good fucking idea. He's like the classic fucking Bond movie villain, except for he's a dipshit. So the fact that people are like liberals and leftists are shitting themselves that they live in a proto-fascist state where Donald Trump is running the fucking country, but we should somehow magically get to UK levels of lethal force between law enforcement and the population is fucking insane to me. And then on top of that, what you're doing is you're taking your statistics are completely valid. I verified them my fucking self. I already fucking know that you're correct, that we kill roughly 1,000 people per year, and the UK kills like an average of like 3 to 5. Okay, so your stats are completely correct. All right. But at the same fucking time, if you take 1,000 into the general fucking population, it's spit in the fucking ocean. And then on top of that, if you further divide homicides by law enforcement into unarmed and armed, it's even less. It's like less than it's like a dozen unarmed people per year are killed unarmed. So while I think there's plenty of productive territory on which we could discuss, we can either discuss those things or you can trigger the fuck out of me and then refuse to ask questions. So it's up to you.
I think I could do both. So the first thing I would say is
no triggering. Let's not trigger. Come on.
I'm just being a little spicy because it's funny. But okay, I'll be nicer. So first I would say it seems like a contradiction for police officers like yourself to advocate for widespread civilian firearms and then use that as an excuse to shoot citizens for exercising that right, like. And run around and go and say I live in it's a dangerous society because there are guns, but I support those guns being there, so I need to have this authority to shoot people at a whim because there's guns here, and how do you expect me to do my job? I could be killed. Well, I don't think that actually makes much sense. That means that your liberty to own the weapon is actually much less than a gun controlled scenario because everyone assumes you have guns all the time, and having a gun gives the state the right to execute you at a moment's notice. And I think we should actually come together. I believe that protesters should begin open carrying firearms and rifles. That sounds like a really good idea and might slow down a little bit of the police brutality that we see widespread because police right now see protesters as challenging their authority and disrespecting them and doing so peacefully. And their response to that is to use less lethal munitions, beat them with batons. And I have a feeling that if those protesters did have things like rifles, the police might be a little bit more nervous before they used force. I think we all can come together and agree on that one.
On that point.
As far as the point about civilian firearms and commercially available rifles actually being a deterrent to the government, that is comically false. And that's not how insurgencies are won. And we can talk about civil wars and things like that if you want, but civilian-owned firearms is not the way that we're going to overturn government oppression. Sort of like you don't see any Second Amendment purists going out there and liberating the camps of children being separated from their parents. You don't see them out there supporting
Mike, you're gish galloping and you're giving me fucking.
I'm not gish galloping. You just did 5 points.
So
I'm touching all your points.
You're giving me 20. You're giving me 20 points, and I can't address a single one of them because you keep moving on to a new point. Can I go to your original point?
You did 5 points. I'm just responding to all of them, and then I'm giving you one response to put a big bow on it.
Give me one response, and I will write down.
Which is the Western. Okay, so basically, I think I understand your argument. Your argument is, I support gun control, and we have a lot of guns in America, and that's good, because an armed society is a polite society or a safe society or whatever Second Amendment babble people believe. And then the argument is, because we're an armed society, that makes policing very dangerous. Therefore, the fact that we kill 800 times more people per year with law enforcement is okay because we've got to respect that Second Amendment right, and that's just the wages of liberty. And we've got liberty here to be shot by cops because we tell them, like Philando Castile, hello, sir. Hello, officer. I am a licensed firearm carrier. I'm currently carrying. Here, let me give you my license to carry. Oh, wait, I just got shot and murdered by the police officer who was so scared because he watched the Warrior training videos of some guy getting ambushed in 1998, and every single traffic stop might suddenly become a life in that situation. Ah! So there you go. There's my. Sorry for the last flourish, but I'm done.
Mike, I was from my own understanding, you said that you believe that protesters should have guns because it would be a deterrence to the police, but that guns are not a deterrence to the government. What do you mean? It
was a rhetorical point I think self-defense strategies for protesters might be an interesting strategy because the police blatantly violate constitutional rights with no accountability at all. So some communities might have to do some self-defense, but it's not a long-term deterrent against the military and the government, right? Like, was the CHOP able to keep out the Seattle Police Department?
Mike, Jesus Christ! Just let me
get sorry,
he answered your question, so that's the answer. So I mean, the answer is it's not really a deterrent to the U.S. military.
I understand where you're coming from. I just want a clarification. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a fundamental question that our entire society has been asking since its inception. It's a question that every single society asks itself. What is the balance between liberty and security? So there are real calculations that have to be done by every single population and every single nation between the concepts of liberty and security. I, because I'm a fan of American history and the foundation of the United States of America, believe that liberty is more important than security, but we can balance these two priorities. And then, so basically, for me, individually, I want American citizens both to have the right to defend themselves on an interpersonal level. Let's say that you run a bodega. I want you to be able to have a concealed weapons permit. Let's say that you're a long-haul truck driver. I want you to be able to have a pistol so you can defend yourself if somebody tries to rob you, because the truth is, police officers, we are between 3 and 10 minutes away from the response to any crime. And that's just a fact of logistics. So if you have to hold your own for 3 to 10 minutes, and if violence can occur within a very brief window, 30 seconds, 1 minute, I mean, robberies and murders occur near instantaneously, then you, as a citizen, as a peer of mine, as somebody that I care about and somebody that I love, I think you should have the right to defend yourself. But then to turn around and equivocate, and that's one point. I will try to make 2 minor points, and then I will return the floor to you in a peaceable way that doesn't try to give you 20 different things to get triggered about. So, number 2, okay, I think private citizens should have the right to defend themselves, and I think they have the right to defend themselves against their own government. Number fucking 2, okay? So to pretend that we haven't been actively fighting dudes in flip-flops with AK-47s for the past 2 decades in both Iraq and Afghanistan, and they've been able to bypass our super high-tech security is kind of insane. And this is what's retarded to me as a veteran, okay? I'm a veteran. I know veterans. We know kind of how asymmetric warfare and insurgency and counterinsurgency work. Almost every single one of us think that 70 million armed Americans could very easily take on the military construct, and we are members of that military construct. So when I hear liberals and progressives fucking simultaneously get haughty, but also shit their pants over the power of our military, I know it's bullshit because I've been a part of it, I've seen the inside of it, and I know how fragile it is. It's still the best military in the world. It's the absolute best military in the world, but it's still an incredibly fragile structure that's based off of logistics, planning, weapons, intelligence.
I don't know if it's the best military. I mean, there's
oh my God, name a better military.
I mean, I don't know, the Republic of Vietnam.
Oh my God,
I mean, they beat our boy. They beat our boys. They sent them with their tail between their legs. I mean,
okay. Let's not. I don't.
That would be an example.
I'm pulling us off of this one. I'm pulling us off of this
gonna,
one. No, let's not go down the rabbit hole.
No, I'm just gonna try to assume that Mike's fucking with me for the next hour.
I'm pulling off.
Trying to assume that.
Okay, no, in all seriousness, okay, first of all, if you actually study counterinsurgency in Iraq and Afghanistan, the most effective weapons were not AK-47s or small arms. They were indirect fire munitions like mortars, or they were roadside weapons called improvised explosive devices.
Mm-hmm.
And those were the ways that soldiers were killed and injured in those countries, not weapons, not small arms. In fact, if an insurgent was carrying a AK-47 and wandering around, he was very likely to be seen on infrared and get his body exploded by an Apache helicopter. That's not a good survival strategy, okay? Those small arms were not the way that they fought our military. They fought our military using intelligent guerrilla tactics and hitting us where we were vulnerable on our logistic supply lines, during patrols and things like that. You know I'm right. So if we were to actually fight the military, and we wanted to have millions of people dying because they are a conventional behemoth. They do have things like Abrams tanks, and they do have things like A-10 Warthogs and Apache helicopters and drones. I don't want to be walking around with my fucking AR-15 up against that, because that's hopeless. The way to do those is to crack them with a ton of pig shit. Okay, that's how you do it. So, as far as the 70 million armed Americans, that it's ridiculous, because Americans are not united. They are not united into a coherent rebellion against Donald Trump. If we had to try to remove Donald Trump, if he refused to step down after the election in 2020, there wouldn't be a united country trying to stop him, turn him out with a united military on the other side. It would be the 35% fascist Americans and whatever percentage of the military they can claim fighting our percentage of the military that we could claim, and whatever Americans would fight against it. That's how an actual civil war would shake out. And it's not going to turn on who has more AR-15s at the start of the conflict. That's not how it worked in Syria. That's not how it's worked in our own country's history. We needed foreign intervention. And so all these fantasies that your personally owned firearm are going to be the difference in some sort of conflict with the government are just that, fantasies. And they're not based on real experiences that we have in the real world at successful insurgencies. And so that's why I think it's kind of a laughable concept to tie the preservation of our liberty with the fact that you could go to a quarter gun store and buy a cheap, Saturday night special for $200. That's not where our liberty springs from.
Connor, if you want to go ahead and we've gotten off topic, if you want to respond to that and wrap up this Second Amendment, get the final statement on the Second Amendment conversation, and then we'll pivot back to Mike for a proposal on defund.
Sure. Okay. So little counterpoint. I probably agreed with about 60 to 70% of what you said. As far as Iraq, Afghanistan, what actually worked versus what actually didn't. I would challenge you on the fact that basically the North Vietnamese army never, probably never beat the American military in a stand-up fight, and that it was, Viet Cong and Viet Minh guerrillas who were largely armed with small explosives and small arms, who eroded the will of the American military. I don't. It's a minor point. It's not something that I really care about. And
Oh no, sure they had effective diplomacy. Listen, their country beat ours in the world, and that's why it's a
okay,
united
let
Vietnam
me
because they
give
won.
you, Mike. Let me give you an olive branch. Okay, let me give you one. Okay.
Okay,
All right.
go ahead.
So I agree with approximately 60 to 70% of what you said. Not all of it. Okay. And then finally, so I would be curious. And Faraday, we can tangent back to law enforcement in a second, but I am
Sure.
just curious. You said that force, you said that privately owned firearms, these are not the wellspring of liberty. I would be interested to know where you think liberty comes from.
Liberty comes from the consent of the governed, the collective that we all share, joining together and agreeing upon unifying principles and rights that we all respect from one another. It isn't from, like Mao said, the barrel of a gun. As much as I love Mao, he was wrong when he said power springs from the barrel of a gun. It doesn't. It springs from the people. That's where it comes from. It doesn't come from something as venal as a firearm. That's pathetic. And
Okay.
any
So
kind of any political system that believes that is bordering on fascism to me, because fascism believes that might makes right and the powerful should rule over the powerless. And that's not the system that I believe in.
So is libertarianism in the belief that individuals should have firearms, like the citizenry should be balanced against the power of the government? Is that a form of fascism?
Wait, is it a form of fascism for libertarians to believe that private individuals should have some sort of firearms?
Should have the means and ability to defend themselves against their own government.
Of course not. Of course you shouldn't have those means.
Okay.
No
All right.
way.
All right.
Because okay, and I'll explain why.
You should or you shouldn't.
You would need to have Stinger missiles. You would need to have mines. You would need to have artillery. You can't defend against the government with a small arm. I think we all agree with that, right? So are you saying like that would be a pretty radically extreme position to believe that individuals should have the right to an RPG and mines and probably nuclear weapons, right? That's the only real deterrent to America that's ever been proved to work. I don't think that we should have the means to fight the government by ourselves. No.
Okay, then we fundamentally disagree on this subject.
You think we should have tanks and nukes and shit?
Jesus Christ, you trying to put words in my mouth? Okay, we also fundamentally disagree on whether or not privately owned small arms are a factor in an insurgency. So we can move on to a more productive topic.
Okay, fine.
Okay. Well, do we want to let Mike put a proposal in defund?
All right. So, okay. What would I say about
something? Give us like something actionable that
numbers for like how I would reduce.
I'm not
police.
Yeah. Tell me how we get to a lower body count year over year in America without Western style gun control.
Okay. So your assertion is that we can't defund the police because we have guns. We can't restructure policing.
No, we can absolutely restructure policing in so many productive ventures. We can change law enforcement so many different ways. And I just picked law enforcement deaths as your example, as a metric of how we have failed as a society. So I was just wondering what ways we can change our law enforcement to reduce the civilian deaths in the United States of America without fucking with gun control.
So a policing model that I think makes a lot of sense would be one that first of all, let me explain this. As a leftist, I don't think that any one issue is decoupled from the other, right? Like crime is not something that arises from the ether and that the solution to crime is law enforcement. That's not how society really works. Crime is a result of a lot of different factors, right? And the most important, if you actually look at the political science and the sociology, is income inequality, material deprivation, lack of healthcare, lack of opportunity, despair. That's the kind of stuff that leads to creating crime and crime-ridden areas. So my first thing would be to attack the causes of crime directly through increased government supports for poor people, increase our funding for schools, provide universal housing, provide universal childcare, increase minimum wages, push unions to cover all jobs in America, and things like that would structurally, fundamentally change our economy and attack those material causes, number one. Number two, that would mean stop using, we have two jobs in America that we use to try to solve every problem. It's teacher and police officer. The police are fundamentally unequipped to handle 90% of the calls they respond to. Or at least
Jesus Christ, but can we
they
stop
shouldn't
the
be.
hyperbole?
They should,
Can we stop the
and
hyperbole?
I'm going by, according to the typical shift by officer time spent. There was a study, and I will go down each one of major metros. I'll use the example of New Orleans Police Department.
Yeah, let's go.
37% of their time was non-criminal calls. 15% was traffic. 15% was other crime. 14% was property crime. 10% was proactive, meaning they just decided to approach someone and search them, interrogate them, hassle them on the street.
What percentage was that?
10%.
Okay.
6% medical and 4% violent crime. I would like to see, if we have some sort of public safety officials that have guns, they would only respond to that 4%. And the rest of those things would be shaken out into specialists that are unarmed, similar to the way they do it in London. Now, you can't tell me that London is so much more dangerous than some suburb in or is less dangerous than some suburb in Pennsylvania or Florida or any other random place in America. That's just not true. If they can manage that, the vast majority of their officers in London, a world city, can walk around without a weapon, we could do it the same way here. And I want to see mental health specialists deal with mental health crises. I want to see social workers dealing with domestic situations. Now, yes, there's going to occasionally be times where people are violent. We need to have drug treatment. We need to have a counseling available. And their interventions happen earlier in the cycle, as opposed to the way we live in our society now, which is we wait till the problem boils up to a horrible crisis, and then we send violent thugs at the people. That's not the solution to living in a just society. And if you look at these countries, like I explained before, Finland, they fire their weapon 10 bullets a year. Norway, police officers don't have weapons. And the ones that do have them locked in their car, and they need command authorization before they use them. And they just don't shoot people. And would that involve some increased theoretical risk to an individual officer? Probably. But if you actually look at the causes of death by officers, most of their causes are accidental, traffic, dying from bad health, stuff like that, vastly outweighs the violent deaths. So I'm willing to exchange a little bit of officer safety for vastly increased personal safety for the citizens, a respecting of their rights, and reallocating those resources so the violent armed individuals get 10%, say, of the funding they get now, and we get a lot more resources spent on social work, drug treatment, mental health services. That's the proposal that people are working with. And I don't have a direct, the way this thing works with budgeting is that is a very much grounded in the realities of a local area. Whether they have drug treatment problems or they have mental health crises or exactly what's going on, maybe they have endemic poverty. How we would exactly divide that funding would depend upon each individual locale. But that's the facts as far as I understand them. And I would like to hear you and your response.
So point number one, which was basically crime is driven by material conditions, we almost completely agree upon. Okay. So I think there are so many factors that go into creating criminality. And as somebody who was a police officer in the schools, I served in the schools for a year. I saw just how important it was for a young child, a child that was going down the wrong road, to have a mentor and to have a positive influence in their life, and how that could fundamentally change them as a person and lead to better outcomes. If you were talking about youth intervention, if you were talking about universal pre-K, if you were talking about high quality education, if you were talking about, we already have cheap food, but food deserts, resolving food deserts. If we were talking about, early childhood reading programs, if we were talking about civic education, within our public schools in order to fundamentally alter the relationship between law enforcement and the citizenry, I think you could vastly improve our society in so many remarkable ways that would make your fucking head spin. So
Sounds like you're more of a socialist than you thought.
I never the thing. Okay, I am probably a pro-gun liberal. The thing that I am most right-wing on is probably some controls for abortion and not less controls, but I am more gun friendly than most lefties. Let's put it that
Well,
way.
no, I mean, actually, most leftists kind of, as Marx said,
Mhm.
at no time should the proletariat be disarmed.
Okay.
So, like, the most left position is to actually arm the worker. So, like,
So
it's more of a liberal position to support gun control, and it's more of a, like, measuring. It's a technocratic thing. You look and see how many people are dying, and you try to reduce deaths. That's where you cut. It's a way of looking at the world. Whereas, like, a far leftist would believe in class war and class conflict, and would believe that you need to have weapons available for the workers because they're oppressed by the bourgeoisie and the capitalist class. So maybe you're even more radical left than you thought.
Well, okay. So let's just say that we have a fundamental agreement on material conditions need to be improved in order to reduce crime. I think we agree there. So
Okay.
the follow-up point being that you would have to have the utilitarian calculus in place. And I'm not trying to make you stick to some kind of like fundamental model that you come up with off the fly, and then I'm like, oh well, this is wrong with the
One
model.
second, I gotta thank TYT. Thanks for the raid. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Good.
So all right. So I'm not going to make you simultaneously create and defend some random fucking model. Okay. But at the same time, you have to have that utilitarian calculus down because so for instance, you indicted. Let's just say you're a little hyperbolic. Okay. You
I've
indicted.
been known to be hyperbolic from time to time. Sure.
I've noticed that. So you kind of indicted law enforcement for spending their time in ways that you don't approve of, and also in unique calls, being the only ones that warrant violence. But that kind of ignores how calls work fundamentally. Most of the time when law enforcement is going to a violent call, they don't know it's a violent call. It starts out as a simple battery. It starts out as a domestic dispute. It starts out as an attempted burglary. It starts out as an attempted robbery. And from there, it escalates. So the information up front is not, hey, law enforcement, I am being stabbed in the chest. It is, hey, law enforcement, there is a man outside my house who's attempting to gain entry. So we had a fundamental agreement. Let's have a fundamental disagreement. As a cop, you do not know which call is going to be the nonviolent one, and you don't know which one is going to be the violent one. It's literally if Russian roulette with a million barrels. Okay, you just don't know. So to not disarm law enforcement, but then to ask them to play Russian roulette with a million barrels, you are going to see a fundamental decrease in the amount of people who are willing to do that job. Also, the model, the proposed model of having a specific armed team that only responds to violent or potentially violent calls. The reason why that could work but doesn't necessarily work, and we would have to talk about how it would work, is because 80% of law enforcement is patrol, and it's the deterrence of property crime. So as a leftist, you might think we need to move past the material model, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, right now, we live in a capitalist society. Right now, we have personal and private property. Right now, law enforcement, a majority of their job is protecting personal and private property. So
I mean, no, I agree with that 100%. I think that's the problem we have here is that the wealth inequality, the fact that so many people have so little and so some minority have so much, causes that. And that's why our society, in societies in decline like ours, you see what a high percentage of people working in what's known as guard labor. That's actually not productive labor. You're not producing shit if you're standing around watching to make sure nobody takes something. That's a worker that could have been out there doing something, say building a road or a school or God knows what, is instead standing there with a gun, making sure some desperate poor person doesn't come and try to do a smash and grab.
Do you know the ratio of American law enforcement to the citizenry?
I think there are 700,000 cops, and I guess we got 315 million. So do the math. I know
Yeah,
it's 1 in 400 or something.
it's 2 per 1,000 roughly.
Okay.
So for 2 per 1,000, for 1,000 people to guard the personal and private possessions of 1,000 people with 2 guards, does that seem like an appropriate ratio?
I mean, that would just be asking me to make a determination based on my seat of my pants, and all I can say is we don't just have police officers doing guard labor. We have security, private security that's increasing. We have we have, brinks, we have security systems and burglar systems. And so guard labor is more than just the police per se. It's also like all the other services, gated communities and all the other shit that happens when some people are very well off and the vast majority aren't. And if you look at our country, like as a cop, you served 4 years as a cop, you said, and you
Mhm.
did it in Florida. I guarantee one of the things you probably saw a lot of was a lot of people dead with a needle in their arm.
A couple.
And that's because our societies and our life expectancy has declined the past 4 years. And I don't think sending police officers with Narcan is the solution to the drug overdose problem, right? The solution to the problem is to examine why so many more people are killing themselves with drug overdoses, both intentional and unintentional. And this is the problem with decoupling one issue from all the others. Like saying,
Mhm.
defund the police. Yes, if all you did was reduce the amount of public safety officers out there, and then you had a horrible dog eat dog capitalist society that never cares for its people, that's not going to solve problems.
Good.
Okay. But the reason why people want to defund the police is they want to take those resources and they want to allocate them into other areas. And the truth is, we should be spending more, period, not just trying to take it from one budget line item and put it into another. That's kind of stupid. We should be taxing the rich and we should be spending it on a just society. And we can look around the world and see societies where they have free childcare. They have in Vienna, they have like guaranteed high quality public housing that's so good middle class people live in it.
Yeah,
That's the kind of world we want to live in, where people's needs are taken care of, and then you see what their potential is, and when they have something to lose, when it feels like the society's buying into them, when they feel like they're respected when they walk down the street, they're not going to go and commit violence. Now, there may be some percentage of people that still do, but it's going to be a hell of a lot less than it is in America. And when you look at societies around the world where they do the models that I'm talking about, it's safer, it's nicer, and people are happier. So to me, that's liberty. That's freedom. Freedom from want and freedom to pursue my personal happiness. That's freedom. So it's not Jeff Bezos making his billionaire counter go from 200 billion to 300 billion. All right, sorry for the monologue there.
That was
But
beautifully said there, Mike.
No,
Connor, do you want to? I'll give you the floor for a bit now.
Yeah, so I was going to say that it's good that we fundamentally we have another point of fundamental agreement. Okay, so I literally have this down right here. It says defund is cart before the horse. So my point would be with all the people who are saying abolish the police, defund now, chop the budget by 30%, and then we'll just see what the fuck happens when we fund some social programs. We don't really have an organized idea right now. The cart is fundamentally in front of the horse, and like in an egregious way that borderline makes me angry. Go
ahead. But I gotta make a note. I'll make a note on that. Sorry for interrupting you.
Make a note. But you did have a 10-minute soapbox. I would like a 5-minute soapbox.
Go ahead, buddy.
So all right. So for my 5-minute soapbox, the point being that basically that as a student of insurgent warfare, like yourself, as you know. There are power vacuums, and basically what happens when you remove one powerful structure and you don't have anything in place is that a new power structure is going to arise in order to take the room of the old. So in order to avoid a world in which we basically fundamentally drastically change the shape of police departments where 70% of the police officers are now unarmed, 30% of them are armed, they're only responding to potentially violent calls, 70% of them are social work. Do your social workers, are they uniformed? Do they have mace and a taser, or are they just social workers? Sorry, I just wanted
I mean, I think it doesn't seem to me that a social worker is the type of person that's going to do violent action. Like it's a totally fundamentally different type of person. And
Well,
so what you're
that
talking
makes
about
me
is active. Let me just say this one thing. What you're talking about is active, acute interventions. Like something really bad is going down, and we've got to send someone immediately to put out the fire, right? Like, but if you talk to a fire department, the best way to fight fires is not to have the best fucking fire truck. It's to have smoke detectors. It's to keep your paint cans away from the electrical equipment. It's to prevent
Yeah,
frayed cords. That's the way you do it.
I'm interjecting not because I disagree. I just feel like that plays into the earlier argument, and we both agree. Okay.
Well, no, I'm just saying. So, like, you're asking me, and it's like, well, I mean, no, the social workers would be the social workers.
Jump back on my soapbox real quick, but I do appreciate the answer. So my point being that you would need to at first scale up all of these solutions. You would need to create the departments of social workers that basically had, you would need to improve education. This is an intergenerational project. This is not going to happen in the next 5 years. This is something that needs to happen over the next 100. So
I agree with that.
You're talking about fundamentally.
I'll give you a quick example. Like in Finland, they had one of the worst schools in the entire world.
Hold on, Mike.
Okay, go ahead.
I need my 5 minutes. Okay.
Go ahead.
So you need to fundamentally change basic education. You need to fundamentally change our social worker infrastructure. You need to fundamentally change the emergency responses to people who are in crisis. You need to fundamentally change the structure of the police department. And the police department right now has to serve as an emergency stopgap until you have those institutions and those fundings in place. So to randomly defund the police by 30%, basically there's so many institutional pressures, and there is low-level corruption that I wouldn't mind talking about, that would basically completely fuck up the society in the meantime, that what you're going to do by having this very short-term, going to be a little rude here, virtue signal about defunding the police is you're going to have a backlash in the opposite direction, where the right wing is going to say, I fucking told you so. You took cops off the road, XYZ person got murdered. You took cops off the road, XYZ person got raped. And it doesn't matter if it's statistical or if it's anecdotal, you're still going to get pounded over the head by the law and order crowd. So in order to actually do this, defunding is way putting the cart before the fucking horse. You have to create these solutions first before you just rip out 30% of the law enforcement budget. That's the end of my 5 minutes.
Well, so this type of argument is what I like to call the political plausibility argument. And every time I run into it, I have only one response. No one has fucking any idea how the world is going to look in 6 months, or can game out the reactions that people are going to have based on the policies. We just frankly don't know. And I'm not going to hold back on what I think is a very empirically founded and just transition, because I'm worried about what the Republicans might put in a television ad in 6 months or 2 years. It just frankly is not something that I can respond to, because it's not dealing with the argument at hand or the real world. It's a projection, and frankly, none of us have the ability to know what the future is, because if we did, we'd all be multi-billionaires playing the stock market and not doing debates on Twitch and YouTube. So that's my response to the political plausibility shit. And as a way of example, Black Lives Matter itself, the movement, 18 months ago, I was one of the minority in the country, the 40% that supported Black Lives Matter. Now Black Lives Matter has plus 20%. It's a massive majority of people now support Black Lives Matter. And if you had talked to me 18 months ago, I would not have predicted within such a short time that we would see such a sea change in political opinion. So, it's tough when something's at 40%, which is a very high number, and then it all of a sudden springs another 20, 30 points. That's an impressive change. So, and ultimately, I would say that the reason why I support candidates and radical candidates that I do is because they see that small incremental dicking around changes are not going to fix what's wrong with America. America is now in need of large, systemic, desperate changes to keep this society whole. I mean, and I'm not a Black person. I'm not a brown person. I'm a highly educated white guy. I have a lot of privilege. And the thing about white guys like you or me or Faraday telling Black and brown people that it's okay that they get massively over-policed, that they get killed at much higher rates, that they experience the carceral state to see children prosecuted as adults, to get harsher sentences for the same crime, to go to schools that get funded with half the funding, to live in housing that is contaminated by asbestos and lead because, the Republicans might react bad. I'm just not going to do that. That's morally bankrupt to me. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to say this is the right thing. And I actually have faith. And I look at one thing about American history is that you can see when movements have actually gained power and effected change, the American people did not backlash. They did not backlash to FDR passing Social Security. They did not backlash to all those massive social programs that FDR put in. In fact, he won massive landslides. They did not backlash to the war on poverty from LBJ. They gave him the biggest landslide in American history. Now, what they did backlash to was a stupid fucking war in Vietnam that killed people, killed millions and wasted lives. So I believe that the American people, if they see positive change in their own lives, they're going to support that politician. What they will backlash to is broken promises and weakness like Barack Obama or Donald Trump. People who are not going to fundamentally change a goddamn thing and just make things worse.
Okay.
So there you go. That's my response to the plausibility thing.
Okay. Then I'm curious, just from like a communicative standpoint. Okay. So I'm not a poli-sci major. I'm actually like really interested in poli-sci. So, but something that I've noticed with politicians and rhetoricians and all that kind of stuff is you stake out a very aggressive, like hyperbolic structure and a movement. So for instance, like the statement defund the police, it's divisive, it's catchy, it gets the people going. It attracts attention. And then on top of that, through the attention that you've now received, you can now talk about other things like improving material conditions, maybe some gun control, maybe some, whatever, based off of the shitstorm that you just started.
Or defund means cut the police funding significantly.
Right.
Because you don't need as many jackbooted thugs. You can fund less of them, and then you can...
I think we fundamentally disagree on what law enforcement is or how it operates. But anyways, so the point, but here's kind of my point. This is not just a political calculus, okay? So for instance, you were saying like, well, I can't determine what's going to happen in 6 months, so I'm not going to factor that in, and it feels bad faith when other people try to factor in the opposite side's reaction to what my political goals are. Okay, all right, fair fucking enough. But there actually is like a moral and consequential argument that if you took a utilitarian structure that was basically, you might not agree that it's functional. So dysfunctional, but still operating. And then you moved it into a worse state that fundamentally affected certain people's lives. If more people got murdered, if more people got raped, if more people got killed, if more people got stabbed, shot, whatever. Like I think New York is like up 400% as far as shootings within the past like 3 months. So obviously economics plays into it. I'm not trying to say economics doesn't, okay? But my fundamental point being that you and me...
I actually don't think that's true. I just read a study, not to interrupt you, but you threw out stats about crime. I'm pretty sure crime, of the major 7 categories of crime that the NYPD reports on, there is, I think it's like robbery, rape, burglary.
Mike, I need my 5, man. I let you go for 5.
But you said it was up 400%. I think they're all down, actually. And that would make sense because people are staying at home due to coronavirus.
Okay, potentially. We'll research this thing, okay? But the point being that if you don't have the material improvements put in place, and then you basically do a 30% slash, you have untrained, unarmed social workers going out to nonviolent calls, and you just fucking throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. Not like you, me, people who are no longer on the road, people who no longer stake their income, their health, their well-being on being law enforcement or interacting with law enforcement. We are not the ones that are affected. This is fundamentally going to affect the people who the policy like exerts pressure on. So to say, oh, well, we'll just back off and we'll have, unarmed cops and we'll have, social workers take their place and they'll be unarmed too. And they'll probably be disarmed and they'll only respond to low calls. For you and me, it's super fucking easy, but statistics don't mean dick shit to the individual. So if you send a social worker to a burglary call or a social worker to a health crisis and they get stabbed to death with a fucking screwdriver, that's going to be national fucking news. So it's not a question like you can say like political pragmatism or like I'm not trying to predict the opponents or whatever, but at the same time, not only did you just majorly fuck up in one of the most unoptical fucking ways that fuels the other side, which you don't have to care about. I'm just telling you that you did. But then on top of that, you are massively discouraging people from buying into the system that you yourself are fucking pitching. So you can't just run at this full fucking tilt. And there's something to be said for like political advocacy where you stake out the most extreme position. That way people have to move in your direction. But at the same time, I'm talking about like the way that I communicate anyways is pragmatic, truthful reality. I'm not trying to give you hyperbole so you can move closer to my political position. I'm trying to give you the way that I fucking see it and the things that are fucked up and the things that aren't. And that's what I'm trying to convey to you. So soapbox done, your turn.
I mean, listen, if people die tragically and you know, that's what happens in the world, and there's a certain level of unavoidable tragedy. That's our lot in life, you know. Some kids are going to get cancer, some people are going to crash their cars. It's just, you know, that's the way the world is. But my question would be, what decisions can we make to reduce that unnecessary suffering? And if that decision results, instead of a cop shooting an innocent black man, it results in a social worker, you know, 5 innocent black men are not killed and 1 social worker is killed. I mean, that would be a juster society. And I don't want to see innocent social workers killed, but it seems inherently immoral to say that we should kill those 5 innocent black men because it'll look bad when that white, blonde, blue-eyed social worker gets stabbed by the screwdriver. It just doesn't make any sense to me that we should design our society intentionally wrong and stupid because it might look bad.
Okay. So let me just counterpoint this really quick, okay? So it's not just the idealistic college grad who gets raped and murdered in the hood because she went to the wrong call, okay? It's not just the unoptical death. It's also the stats. So we have roughly 15,000 homicides inside the United States every single year, okay? Then we have the 1,000 that are basically committed by law enforcement. And one of the most frustrating things about this conversation, where you triggered me super early on, was the fact that you acted like every single one of those 1,000 people was an innocent person that was killed just because in the UK they are able to arrest without fucking killing people. Some of these people committed rapes, some of these people committed robberies, some of these people committed fucking murders, and they were in the act of either escaping or attempting to kill law enforcement while they were fucking doing it. So to act like every single one of the 1,000 people that law enforcement killed were innocent is kind of insane to me, to the point that I'm triggered. And
well, I mean, here's the thing.
I need to finish.
Go ahead, but that's ridiculous. Like, we know how to arrest people without killing them.
Okay, we would go all the way back to the guns argument, so I'm not trying to go there. But not only would you have the little unoptical rape/murder with a screwdriver, but you would also very likely have additional murders and additional violence and additional rapes and additional robberies in these impoverished areas, in these areas of brown and black people and poor whites, who we are allegedly making these fundamental reforms for. So if you make these fundamental reforms, but then you end up fucking over the population that you're desperately trying to help, not only is it going to backfire and give super unoptical ammunition to the other side, but your entire movement is going to fail, because basically what's going to happen is you're going to fuck over the people you're trying to help. I see the floor.
So a couple things here. First, your assumption is that more officers leads to less crime. And recent social science research has actually shown that not to be the case. More officers does not necessarily lead to less crime. In fact, we've seen reductions in total numbers of officers as a share of the population over the past 15 years, especially since Obama was elected, actually. And we've seen crime decline by an additional percentage during that time. So the idea that reducing officers is necessarily going to lead to more rapes and murders, I don't think is actually borne out by the evidence. And secondly, like, well, what else was I going to say? Shit. As far as like the black and brown people, I don't think it's white officers who don't live in the city, who don't have any social connections, going in hard to police these communities, to disproportionately arrest black and brown men, and putting them into our carceral state is keeping crime down. It's in fact not doing that. So I just fundamentally reject the entire premise that reducing officers is going to result in some big spike in crime. And also, what else was I going to say? I think that's my main response to that point. Hey
Okay.
guys, do you mind if I grab a water or something real
Please.
quick?
Yeah. As a matter of
Go
fact,
ahead, man. Let's just take a little 2 minute.
All right.
Good?
Thanks.
All right. Take a little 5 minutes.
I'm gonna grab some water too. I'll be right back.
Take your time.
I couldn't hear you, but I'll see you in a second.
Oh, you can't hear me.
Be right back.
Can you guys hear me in the chat? Can you guys hear me? Okay. Well, I don't know why he couldn't hear me then. How are you guys doing? How's everybody doing? What did everybody think about when Counterpoints brought up? He brought up the fact that the reason you get escalated encounters with police and civilians is due to the civilians having guns. And I've been thinking about that a lot recently. What effect do guns have on public spaces, and what's the benefit of that, and then what's the risk of that? Hey, Mike.
All right, 1 second. I have to put my headset back in.
From the orientation, it looks like Mike's taking over the show.
Well, I hope I'm
camera
being fair.
orientation, not the.
I hope I'm being fair and not too spicy, chat. What do you think? How's it going so far? What have I forgotten? What have I forgotten? What points have I missed? Check Discord DMs. Hold on, let me do it on my phone. Oh, are the other speakers too quiet? Like, I should have asked that an hour ago. But it's my stream, so I get to use the louder volume as a debate tactic.
Back, friends.
Excellent. Okay. Connor, you go ahead and start.
Okay. So I wrote this down, but okay. So Mike, would you find?
Okay. Can I? The point that I forgot, I just popped in my head. Do you mind if I say it out? It was my fault. Okay. So I'll give an example. Like, you talked about how in other countries they figured out how to arrest violent criminals, and in the U.S. we can't do it. Well, I would challenge that by pointing to the Aurora movie shooter or Dylan Roof, who murdered a bunch of black parishioners in their church after sitting through a service with them. And the cops arrested him and then drove him directly to a Burger King because the poor little murderer was too hungry. They didn't want to put him into jail on an empty stomach, I guess. So, the idea that violent criminals deserve to be killed, I actually would challenge that, or that we would use violence to protect property as that seems to be a twisted morality. Now, I don't want to live in a society where your personal effects are in danger. You're always going to be encroached upon by a hostile stranger. But I also think that thinking that property or burglars should be shot and killed and officers of the law should be judge, jury, and executioner is not the way that we should live in our society. Oh, let me fix everything. Everything is wrong again because you came back.
I would like to address the Dylan Roof thing individually. So,
all right, go ahead.
There's most cops I know, including myself, our primary impulse when dealing with a vile human being would be to beat their ass or execute them. That's what we would want to do, right? So if I bumped into Dylan Roof on an interpersonal level after he had committed egregious, my primary
Connor,
Your audio just
You're starting to cut out a bit. Now, can you just bring it closer to you and say something?
Uh-oh. I think he knocked the cable free.
Yeah, that's okay. Give him a minute.
All right, why he can't respond, we can score a bunch of cheap points.
Oh, really? They won't be counted. Yeah.
So, ultimately, like the thing about American police is we didn't really even talk about the authoritarianism and the idea of calling it liberty where police expect compliance. I kind of agree with the founding fathers. The founding fathers had a very skeptical view of agents of the state. And basically, if you read the Constitution, it says in the Fourth Amendment that you have the right to be secure in your persons and papers and effects. And that means that cops and agents of the state don't get to harass you. They had it during, like, one of the reasons the revolution took place is they had something known as general warrants. So basically, the crown would get from a general warrant, and they would give it to their soldiers, where they could just search anybody's shit, go into anybody's house, harass anybody they wanted, even though they had no evidence that they'd done anything wrong at all. So we kind of have that now with the way the police operate. Hey, do you mind if I search your car? Do you mind if I search your bag? Oh, you said no? Well, I'm going to bring the canine, etc. And that kind of, frankly, bootlicking posture and authoritarian posture that they expect the citizen to have is totally in contradiction to, like, what a free society is like. And I would like to see, a different policing model.
What is going on with Counter?
Uh-oh.
Well, hold on. Did you hit mute on your Discord or something, buddy?
I don't see any mute on it.
Uh-oh.
Huh. Looks like he's got an Antifa mic.
I think he's about to... Yeah, he's about to...
He's gonna bounce?
No, I think he's about to use a different mic. He's about to switch his mic. You'll have to change it into Discord settings, too.
Yeah. He might have to restart Discord. I mean, like, hey. And I hope I haven't missed too many points, chat. Give me a
I don't know what's going on. All right, he's gonna come back. Shoot, we might have to reset this. Okay, one sec, chat. We're gonna get this fixed. Let me mute myself and fix this.
That's a good copy pasta. If that would be really funny for me. If all the chat was just like in here or on Faraday's just saying, "Stop resisting, Connor. Stop resisting."
Hello?
Oh boy. All right. I can hear you. I can hear you. It's
Seriously?
I can hear you.
Okay, sorry.
What about now?
I was muted. Connor?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Bring it away from your mouth a little bit.
Hello?
And then I'm going to turn you down a little bit.
Okay.
And then, yeah, the quality's not good, but we're fine. We can understand you.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry for the drop in quality. I can't quite figure out what's going on with the fancy mic. So it's okay. We'll muddle through. So Mike, you want to give me your last point again? Just because I got distracted with that shenanigans.
I talked about how the American policing regime is in violation of our traditions and civil liberties. talk about the Fourth Amendment and the founding fathers' belief that you should be secure in your person, papers, and effects, and that our policing strategies now are highly invasive, and they have an authoritarian mindset where they expect compliance, even though you as a citizen have a right to be secure and not to be hassled and bothered and searched. And cops kind of expect you to let them paw through your stuff and look through your car, and things like canines and stuff like that should probably be banned. And we should go back to a pre-drug war style of like searching for contraband. That's kind of my thought, is that it's not really, it's more of an authoritarian model as opposed to, you as someone who believes in liberty would probably understand what I'm talking about, and the founding fathers, and how one of the reasons we had the revolution was because of something known as a general warrant, which is basically the British officials had just the right to search everybody's shit. They could go anybody's house, they could go through all their stuff, and they found that to be a violation of their fundamental rights. And I think that our policing regime now, especially canines, quote, indicating, is kind of in that thread. And then you have Terry stops, and you have stop and frisk. You have all sorts of other means that have been used to subvert the Fourth Amendment and our rights to avoid being hassled and searched by cops.
Okay. So I'm gonna respond to this, and then I'm gonna ask you guys a question just about the audio. Okay. This is another point of fundamental agreement. The fact that we flagrantly violate the Fourth Amendment, left, right, and center, is actually an incredibly large source of frustration for me, both personally and when I was on the job. The violation of the intent of the Fourth Amendment was also an incredibly frustrating for me while I was on the job. And I feel like we've drifted away from the first principles. I don't want to lead you with a whole bunch of questions, but what I would put out as a counter argument is that authoritarian law enforcement can be effective. And I'm not saying that it's good.
Nobody says it's not effective, but it also harasses a bunch of people who are innocent, and it violates their fundamental rights. And the principle is that we'd rather guilty people go free than any innocent person be falsely accused, harassed, and have their rights violated. That's why we have what's known as the exclusionary rule. The exclusionary rule basically says that if a police officer violates your rights and then discovers evidence of a crime, the fact that he violated the rights first means that that evidence can't be admitted into court. And the reason why we do that is to try to discipline law enforcement into respecting your rights. Unfortunately, I think that's a dumb way of doing it. I think that we should discipline law enforcement directly and encourage actual effective investigations that respect rights. And you know what? If some people get away with crimes, I'm okay with that, because I'd rather not be constantly surveilled and harassed and have my privacy and rights invaded by cops. And I think most people agree with that.
Well, okay, just quick question of like personal politics or whatever. Like, are you? I'm not trying to be like personal or shitty or anything like that. Are you a tanky? Do you support authoritarian regimes? Or are there any authoritarian regimes that you do apologetics for? I'm asking.
I can't think of any, but I wouldn't call myself a tanky.
Okay, so you would prefer American law enforcement over Chinese law enforcement?
That's just like I hate that kind of framing of a question. That seems ridiculous, because I think they're both pretty fucking terrible, and I would not pick either as a model. Would be my answer to that.
Fair enough. All right.
I mean, I think you as a police officer, I think you agreeing with me that the Fourth Amendment is flagrantly violated, and the spirit of the Fourth Amendment, and that's pretty disgusting.
It's worse in the Northeast. It's far, far, far worse in the Northeast, which is also like this is maybe part of the reason why I get butthurt, is because I feel like a lot of these things are regional too, and metropolitan versus versus rural. And like I'm not trying to say like there aren't problems in the rural areas. I'm just saying they're different problems. So my primary contention is that like Philadelphia, New York, Los Angeles, all that kind of stuff, some of the places where you see the most egregious abuses, and also where you see flagrant and systemic violations of the Fourth Amendment, and you see flagrant and systemic abuses of the Second Amendment, they tend to be northeastern places. They tend to be on the West Coast. and that's kind of where I always get uncomfortable, because I feel like on one hand we have this like constant creep towards leftism where, you know, we're going to make things better and we're going to institute this thing and it's going to make everything awesome, but there's this increasing like authoritarian bend in society that seems to be predominant in the Northeast, where they just straight up don't give a fuck about liberty, or, you know, I mean that's really it. They just don't give a fuck about
Well,
liberty.
I would contend with that, because there's a case that just happened really recently, which there was a African American veteran uh, who was from Arizona, and he had a medical marijuana card, and he was driving with his wife to visit their family, and I think it was South Carolina.
Mhm.
And on the way, they stopped. They were driving through Alabama. I think that he might have had family in Alabama. I don't want to get into the details too wrong, but he stopped at a gas station, and it was a rural Alabama gas station. And while they were filling up, one of those local cops, good old boys, sauntered on over and said, "You're not from around here. You mind if I look through your car?" And they stupidly said yes. And inside the car, he found some of that medical marijuana. And he explained to the officer, "Oh, I have a medical marijuana card. I have PTSD from my service in Iraq and Afghanistan. And this is one of the treatments that I've been given." And the response of the Alabama officer was, "We don't have that here." And he arrested them. And then, and the search incident to arrest, they discovered pain medication that was prescribed to the wife. Now, that was legally prescribed pain medication, but it wasn't in its original bottle, which in Alabama was a felony. And so they went ahead and arrested her as well. Now, to me, that doesn't seem like a appropriate exercise of discretion, number one. Two, it's and then he ended up getting sentenced to 60 months in prison. Now, to me, that seems pretty goddamn authoritarian. That seems like it's pretty invasive. That seems like it's violating the spirit of the Fourth Amendment. Now, you know, I am one of those people that's educated in the law, and if a cop comes up to me and says, "Hey, Mike, do you mind if I search through your bag?" My answer is, "You know, I'm sorry, I've got places to be. I just can't stay around here. I'm gonna say no. Sorry, gotta go." And that's just the way it is. But I can tell you, as a white guy, upper class white guy, I'm probably going to be respected in my decision not to do it. Whereas a person of color, they says, no, I'd rather not. They're probably going to have to sit there while a canine unit gets called in, and then the dog can, quote, indicate they smell something, and they can rip the car apart. Now, all this happens all over the country. This is not just in metropolitan areas. This is not just in the Northeast and the West. This is in the South. And if you look at like Alabama and Mississippi, they have much worse incarceration rates for people of color there. And it is a systemic problem of using law enforcement to police and abuse and exploit people of color. And this is just I think it's at this point an irrefutable fact at this. Like, I don't even think people even argue at this anymore, because there's so much evidence that black people commit crimes at the same rate as white people, and they are massively over policed.
And there's like logistical factors that go into this that I could bring in to contextualize it, but I don't feel like that would serve a lot in this conversation. So the point being overall that like stats-based policing and the drug war are two of the largest blights in American law enforcement. So
but that's where
basically,
all the effort goes. You're basically conceding the whole argument to me, because it's all
no, I'm not.
stats based, and it's the drug war is dominant in the way that policing actually operates.
Well, see, that's interesting to me, because you've brought up a couple of points. So, and I'll try to chronologize them. So in 1994, we probably had the worst crime, statistically speaking, that we've ever faced in America in the 20th century. The result was the escalation of the drug war and mass incarceration. Now that worked in the fact that it reduced crime, but the way that it reduced crime was basically by fucking people over and bringing in all these authoritarian policies that both you and I dislike. Now, within the past half decade to a decade, you said that we've dropped in officers, but crime has stayed relatively stable, and if anything, it's improved. What I would say is that basically that initial crackdown, while authoritarian, basically achieved its goals, which was, reducing crime. However horrifically it did so, and it's not a way that we should model our law enforcement in general. But the shift that you've seen with a reduction of officers, but a maintenance or an improvement in criminal statistics, is a shift to the community-oriented mindset. And this is where this gets me a little frustrated, because the defunding thing is not, it's not going to bring in the programs that actually bring the community together. And community-based law enforcement, there's conceptualizing African American communities, conceptualizing Hispanic communities, conceptualizing immigrants, not as an out group to be abused, but an in group to be protected, and an in group to be to basically glean out the predatory parts of that, of that demographic, and then to go after the real criminals. That takes a lot of mental effort. It takes a complete shift in the mindset, and we have begun to shift in that way. But then to shift in that way and then chop us out by like 30% or something like that, it feels dumb. There's entire systems that are in place right now that could be reformed, entire mindsets that could be reformed, that would have so many immediate benefits, and you wouldn't have all this drastic, radical bullshit. End of soapbox.
So, okay, one of the points that you made there was that the drug war actually reduced crime, and I think that's pretty disputed in any kind of in the criminal science literature right now, about the idea of whether or not the crime bill or anything actually reduced crime at all. In fact, I think actually a lot of people are going towards more environmental factors. This is kind of a little bit afield, but one of the things that used to be widespread in America was lead poisoning. And we used to have leaded gasoline, we used to use leaded paints, and a large percentage of people in the 70s and 80s were poisoned with lead. And lead poisoning causes permanent irretractable brain damage that does stuff like reduces impulse control. It lowers your cognitive abilities. It makes you more emotionally reactive. Things that might result in antisocial behaviors. So when people say that the crime rate went down because of X, it might actually have been environmental regulations reducing those things, and ameliorating lead poisoning, stopping things like leaded gasoline from being in the air. And furthermore, like as far as reducing crime and helping these communities, imprisoning more people than every other country in the world by far, even when you compare us to, quote, authoritarian China or Russia or Saudi Arabia, we are far, far, far worse. We incarcerate way more than any of those countries. You could go to Stalin's gulags, and the United States of America's prison industrial complex makes that look like a summer camp. Okay? With the amount of people that we have.
Fuck! Are you serious?
Yeah, do you know how many billions of people are in prison compared to what were in the Soviet Union? Now, the gulags were bad, but the point is that...
Please give me some concessions, Mike. Holy fuck.
I'm saying that I'm saying that the numbers are the numbers. We're worse than China.
Okay. All right, Mike. I'm gonna let you get back onto your soapbox, but I'm just gonna say, is it better to be arrested for drunk and disorderly, taken to the jail, bond out the next day, and be considered one of these incarcerated people, go to a court date 60 days later and get slapped with 20 days community service? Or is it better to break rocks in Siberia for 40 years?
I mean, if you look at America, I got to be honest with you, we have massive amounts of people engaged in prison labor. If you buy a Made in America flag, it was probably made in a prison.
Okay.
Like, we have huge swaths of people. Now, I'm not trying to defend the Soviet Union. I think that's bad. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's bad when they did it in the Soviet Union. I think it's horrible that we're doing it in America today. And in fact, we even have prison labor of people there for civil infractions and immigration violation. Okay. So like, that's the kind of country we're living in right now.
What if they were paid, Mike?
What if they were paid?
Yeah, I'm just going on a
A-
weird tangent.
Any labor that is induced by violence of the state against the will of the person would be slavery,
Okay.
and I would be against that.
What if it was
Um,
What if it was voluntary?
I mean, if people want to do jobs, I mean, like, here's the thing about prison. I don't think that the prison system that we have is anywhere close to what makes sense to reduce recidivism, to reduce antisocial behavior. Fundamentally, the purpose of the criminal justice system, in my eyes, is to make it so there's less antisocial behavior and dangerous shit happening by people. So that means when somebody gets brought in for custodial treatment, say they have abused someone, the purpose of that is to rehabilitate them so they don't do it again. It's not to
Mm.
punish them. It's not to make us feel like strong men. It's to make that person into a whole person so they can go back out into society eventually and contribute and live their life to the full potential, notwithstanding the fact that they did something horrible in the past. Because that model actually results in less suffering in the future. And my goal is to make it through life with less suffering at the end of it. So, I mean, the question of what we do in prisons is kind of missing the point. The point of a prison or any kind of custodial treatment should be about arriving at the best possible person that comes out at the end, and they go and do whatever they're best at in life. And that may
Okay.
sound hippy dippy to some people, but that's what actually works if you look at the evidence.
Okay, so would you agree to a multi-tiered system where basically voluntarily people who wanted to go straight could do things to set them up for success? Education, work voluntarily, build up a savings account, take financial literacy courses, take college level courses, high school level courses, achieve degrees and all that kind of stuff. But then for maybe like a middle tier where people are just incarcerated, they just want to do their time, they're not really looking to reform, but they're also not pieces of shit. And then maybe have that third wing where you have the truly antisocial psychotics who are like our prison system is apparently riddled with rape, and murder and intimidation and all that kind of stuff. And then have a third tier for the people who seem addicted to the criminal lifestyle and are unwilling to reform voluntarily.
So, I mean, listen, none
From a
of these Scandinavian countries are utopias. And I don't want to create that idea in anybody's mind. However, if you look at a country like Norway, they, even in their most hardened maximum security prisons, they are focused on rehabilitation and bringing people out of the environment that you're talking about. And the truth is, there's not a lot of people that when they're truly put into a supportive environment, and yes, in the maximum security prison, there are some murderers. There are some people that are evil,
Yeah.
in the sense that any of us would probably use the term, right? And you know what? Their maximum prison sentence is 21 years before you get a parole hearing. And they work on every individual, and they don't create these ideas of, well, there's a certain group of people that are just bad seeds that we can never fix, because that's not actually what you see when you focus on people as individuals, as opposed to creating these categories of like lesser humans that are just fundamentally bad. That, and frankly, like, I would rather have a system, and I think it's achievable and it exists. That's the part about this, is if I was just talking about some bullshit utopia and fantasy in my own mind, or some obscure writer's book somewhere, that'd be one thing. But when you look at the real world and societies that are better, not perfect, but better, you can see that our path sucks shit and should be fundamentally changed or reformed and defunded. And that is like, I don't really think that there's much disagreement here. The only place you can try to disagree is going down some dark arguments that I could also debunk if you want to do them. But
No, it would be
that's the
it,
society we're in.
it would be the defunding as a concept. So just to summarize my position, and maybe you can find another thing to argue about in there somewhere. So my primary argument is defunding at this point is putting the cart before the horse. My other argument would be that in the United States of America, law enforcement officers will be armed and they will be killing disproportionate amounts of people because of the way that we have firearms. That's point number 2. Point number 3 is basically that in order for us to even remotely talk about you moving law enforcement into some kind of firefighter role where they only respond to violent or potentially violent incidents, and we have on the call psychological staff in order to, basically help people who are in crisis. The only way that model is even remotely feasible is if you fundamentally change the material conditions before you defund law enforcement. And then finally, my point would be that until you actually address these fundamental issues, this is a self-defeating subject where not you, but the left simultaneously attacking civil liberties, and by civil liberties I just mean, I don't want to say left, okay, let's just say the government fundamentally attacking the Fourth Amendment, fundamentally attacking the Second Amendment, and then simultaneously creating this material hellscape. Defunding the police is the least of your fucking concerns and one of the most counterproductive ventures that you could go on at this point. If we were talking about 50 to 100 years from now, where we had improved the material conditions, where we had all these systems in place, and at this point we had truly reformed society, then I would be very happy to talk about, maybe reducing the role of law enforcement. But until you're willing to take on those other subjects like wholesale, this is a virtue signal that further radicalizes your opponents and frankly isn't feasible in the world that we live in right now. And I understand that's the argument to political pragmatism that you don't like, but that's my perspective, is that it doesn't make fucking sense.
I mean, so my model of the future and my concluding remarks, I guess, is that what we're doing? Faraday speaks.
That's up to you. However long you guys want to go, I'm down.
Okay. Well, let me just.
I'm just unmuting myself here. We are at an hour and a half. I mean, these things usually tend to go on 2.5 hours. But if you guys, it's up to you, Mike. I mean, if you want to, yeah, So whatever you guys want to do, it's your all stream. I'm just here to facilitate. So
let me talk to my. Let me. Okay. I'll just say a couple things while he's responding. I'll talk to my chat. All right. Okay. So nothing that is being proposed is, especially for defunding or abolishing prison systems and police, is actually all that radical when you look at the world around us. And for me, I'm not interested in tone policing because, as we talked about earlier, Black Lives Matter used to be very unpopular. In fact, Martin Luther King Jr. used to be unpopular at one point. It is easy for us to sit on the sidelines and criticize the optics of activists, when, as opposed to what the substance of what they're absolutely saying. And the reason why so many people are uniting around the ideas of defund the police is because there are communities of color that feel alienated from our society, feel under siege, feel occupied, feel their rights are being violated, feel like they don't have a place in our society. And they are lashing out against what they see as the instrument of their oppression. And everybody who looks at the evidence ends up agreeing with them. And so in order for us to have a society of justice, equity, peace, we have to end the injustice and the oppression. There's a famous saying that goes along in every protest: no justice, no peace. So if you want peace, if you want a society that functions well, you need to have the presence of justice. And that's not just the absence of conflict. That means the presence of justice and equity for everybody. What does that mean? That means focusing on aligning, fixing the problems of inequality, fixing the problems of a racially biased criminal justice system. That means providing equality of opportunity in housing, in healthcare, in childcare. That means giving people a dignified life where they can pursue happiness and have an actual chance of achieving it. And until we do that, and any one of the proposals I brought up, I can show analogs around the world where not only are these proposals implemented, they work, and they work much better than our society. So if people have a problem with the marketing or the optics, all I can say is that's you. If you look at the evidence and you talk to people who know what they're talking about, like I hope that I have shown that I do, you will find that our positions of the positions of the activists, and I don't speak for all of them, I'm just one of them, is a society that's more just and more equitable for everyone. So That would be my conclusion.
Okay. And then I'll just Faraday. I think this is a good spot. I mean, like we talked about stuff. We obviously have some fundamental disagreements. We have some points of agreement. This would be just my final counterpoint, and I am being a little bit of a smartass. So if Mike wants to respond, he can. But I'm going to be a little bit cheeky and a little bit fun. Okay. So the point being, this argument kind of came in a little heated, right? So Mike, you pretty much said every single fucking thing you could to trigger the fuck out of me. But basically what I did is I did get triggered. I did have an emotional response. I responded to you hopefully relatively tactfully. And while still expressing my concerns about what I wanted to get done, I shifted the conversational tone from that of being instantaneously combative to looking for solutions. This is not something that I was born with. This was a skill. This was a skill that was, 1, taught to me by my parents, and 2, taught to me in the law enforcement academy, and 3, taught to me in the Marine Corps. Basically, how can we move from points of conflict down to de-escalation? So when I hear somebody say that the police system is fundamentally broken, it cannot be reformed, the cops are aggressive, hulky douchebags who only exist to beat the shit out of people, they have no they have no real purpose in society, and we have to shift to a completely different model. Not only does that not reflect my experience, but it's something that I know is alterable because it is something that I went through myself. So I am interested in progressive reform. I don't care if activists use hyperbolic language in order to move the ball in the arc of justice or the arc of truth or the arc of reform. I have no problem with that. What I do have a problem with is basically jumping out of the frying pan into the fire. And I fundamentally believe that conversations like this, in which contentious people who fundamentally don't agree, but we try to work towards a productive solution, I think that's the step forward. And the polarization of America is something that truly freaks me the fuck out.
Yeah, that's nice. And by the way, I wouldn't say that cops are hulky. I would only say 40% or so are roid heads. The other 60% are like donut vacuums. So it's somewhere around that.
All right, fair enough. Shit.
All right, Connor. Well, thank you all for a fun discussion. And if you're out there and you're a content creator, left or right, Faraday, find anybody else who you would like to moderate. And great job moderating. You let us talk, and you only stepped in when I was being too mean to.
Well, I hope it felt
So,
fair.
thank you.
I hope it felt fair.
I felt like it was perfectly fair.
Okay, cool.
Or
all right.
Well, see you guys.
Okay, guys. Thanks for stopping by. Y'all have a good one.
See you, bud.
See you.